Well, good morning, everyone. This is Susan Renning, and we are going to talk about the TFI. And this is just a heads up for some schools who may have the tiered fidelity inventory absolutely perfect. You know how to do all of the tier analysis and set up your action plans and how to utilize and the entire TFI information, and probably should be doing this presentation. So if in fact you have this information down, and this may be an opportunity to use some of this time for other planning. But if you need some work on how to truly and deeply analyze the TFI, and or just want other members to have an opportunity to take a look at exactly what the TFI is and how to utilize that information, then this is the session for you. So the documents that will assist you will be the PowerPoint, which is not loaded on the Moodle yet, the TFI information from when your school took it, and the TFI action plan, and your personal team MTS annual action plan that you work off, hopefully, all the time. So our goal today is to begin linking the MTSS process, that is our data, our action planning, and how to utilize your consultant to be a support. You know, I think too often, and I'm not sure if this isn't kind of our fault in a way, is that the only time that we really have a lot of interaction with you is like when we're coming to actually do some of the evaluation and, you know, on-site stuff. You know, please know that we're available through email, by the phone, whatever, to answer questions at any time. So we're not just those people bounding in to your school with notebooks in hand. So our objective today is to use the TFI to identify your actions and activities for your team. And we're talking team, we're talking school-wide implementation within your building. We want to assist you in beginning really taking a look at an action plan that has the critical components that you can actually take and utilize to build your implementation plan and provide support. And also, again, as we mentioned, how we can assist you. So, the purpose of the school-wide PBI's tiered fidelity inventory is to provide a valid index to the extent of which the PBIS core features are in place within a school. So what does that really mean? So we want to look at your entire school, and that's your Tier 1 universal prevention. Those are all of the pieces that have to do with making your classrooms and your overall school a preventative place for students' most proficient success at all the tiers. And of course, we want to always attend to what's happening at Tier 2, and those are our secondary small group prevention pieces, and our Tier 3. And those are our more intensive kids. So we will be taking a look at all of those. When we're looking at the tiered fidelity inventory as a self-assessment, the primary purpose of this is to help your school teams improve. The primary audience for this instrument is for your school. It's for your team. It's for your entire staff and faculty. It's for families, because families need to know how well you are doing. And for the administrators, because we put a lot on the shoulders of administrators, but by utilizing a really tight self-assessment, it truly guides the administrator in being a leader to be able to find the strengths of his school and team and his faculty, but also to begin identifying the gaps that only he can find the resources and find the time to be able to implement interventions at Tier 1, 2, and 3 to truly impact what's happening in your building. And we do know that using multiple administrations of the TFI really guides schools in being able to do long-term planning for their building. Please remember that the TFI is truly a working product for your school. It can provide, you know, a really nice picture of what your strengths are, but it also identifies those gaps at all tiers. This isn't just another to-do to give to OPI, to give to your consultants. This becomes a working document for your building and for your team. So when we're utilizing the tiered fidelity inventory, please remember that this is formative assessment. This determines current practices that are in place, but it also then gives you, it's just like when we're doing checking for understanding with kids. It's a matter of what do we need to do to make things better. It also provides progress monitoring at all 3 tiers. It provides you with a guide for implementation and how to assess your progress at each of these tiers. And those of you that are going for state recognition, this is the instrument that will assist you in putting together your pieces of the puzzle to go on for the different recognition systems that you get wonderful applause for and get lovely banners at the MBI conference. But also, I think it's wonderful to be able to take those kinds of recognitions back to your school, because it provides a really nice validation of what's happening in your building for your staff, for your students, and most especially for your community. When you're looking at the TFI, there are a whole bunch of different reports and data pieces to look for. The big one is, of course, your total score. And then you keep drilling down, and then you've got your subscales, and then your sub-subscales, and then all the way down to individual items. So this isn't a one-and-done kind of thing where you look at your big score and then move on to, oh, okay, this is what we got. Yeah. It provides the opportunity for your team to be able to take a look at the subscales and do an analysis of how you're doing on the big subscales, but also continue to break those down into subscales at tiers and then move into individual item analysis that will assist you in developing action plans. So how do we look at your report? Well, some things to look at are your subscale reports. Find the areas where there are celebrations and plan those celebrations. Share this with your faculty, share it with your school board and other stakeholders within your community. Of course, we need to find areas that need to support. So how are we going to do that? We are going to look to the individual item report, and then maybe we need to start prioritizing action items that are at a 0 or a 1. 0 means, yeah, we haven't done that yet. 1 is like, well, kinda. But it has not become a part of the systems and culture of your building. And then who do we go for help? Well, you know, there's trainings, there's CSPD stuff, you've got your consultants. So where do we need to go? So all of these pieces then become to blend to build your action plan for support for professional development and basically fidelity to the entire system. So when we are looking at a whole school report, this is kind of what it looks like. And I want to run out a thank you to Anderson School for allowing them to use their really nice data. And at looking at this whole school data, I'm quite excited that my granddaughter is going to be attending this school with this kind of picture. So Anderson School with Tier 1, you can see, is close to 100%. Tier 3 at 100%, or it's Tier 2, and then at Tier 3, you know, between 80 and 90%. So we have some really lovely numbers from Anderson School. Now, when we are taking a look at our subscale reports, this breaks it down into our Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3. At this point, we can start doing an analysis of where there might be some strengths. Obviously, at Tier 1, Anderson School has very strong teaming, very strong evaluation, and I think they should also celebrate their implementation. At Tier 2, again, we have some major celebrations that need to happen at the teaming, for interventions, and for evaluation. Now, let's take a very quick look at the subscale scores for Tier 3. It would appear that, you know, if they were wanting to take a look at an action plan, that maybe the hypothesis would be that looking at their teaming structure for Tier 3 might be something to add to their tentative action list, and also just a little bit looking at their resources. So this begins to drive the building of an action plan. So what kind of celebrations? I think Anderson needs to do a lot of celebrating. Celebrate what you've done. Please share this with your staff and validate the strong commitment and hard work of your team and staff. I think, at least in my experience, in my, gosh, don't even want to say it, 45 years of work with schools, I think too often we just look at what we need to do. And we forget to go back and say, guys, we did a really, really good job. Let's celebrate. Let's validate with the teams. Let's validate with our staff and remind them what a phenomenal job they are doing daily in the trenches, providing education for all of our students. And so, after we've celebrated, it's back to work. So the next step then is to start digging into the individual scores that we have gotten on our TFI. I would encourage that you are going through this and starting to highlight anything, everything that you have a 0 on, and move it into the beginning of what we need to work on. Also, scores of 1 may be something that can take a quicker action and you can get done, because it may just be some pieces that need some support. It may be some pieces that just need to have a little more staff development to build. I don't know, but by putting these things down on your list of things that we maybe should look at will help assist you in start doing some prioritizing as to what and where we need to be putting in our time, where do our resources need to go, and especially what kind of staff development do we need to be providing for our schools. So this is just another snapshot from Anderson, and again, thank you so much. I see lots of 2s here. My granddaughter's going to be in good hands. But I also see a couple of ones that may just need a tiny little boost to bring them up to complete proficiency. So if we were to take a look at Anderson's needs, and to be honest, we stole these, they're Tier 1. They want to amp up and utilize some more work with their discipline policies. They want to emphasize proactive and instructive and restorative approaches to students. Oh, okay. So how do they need to do this? So when you utilize, take a look, and really delineate what needs you have, then that can move you into some very tight problem solving using the tips or any kind of problem solving system that you have that you are utilizing system-wide. At Tier 3, the needs from Anderson would appear to be they want to continue to work on their screening processes and their decision rules, and to continue to work on their support teams that are constructed to design, implement, and monitor to truly student-specific support plans. So how are we going to do this? Well, with Anderson, they only have a few pieces to look at. For schools that are just entering this process, you are going to have a lot more things, especially at Tier 1, that you don't have firmly in place. So what I highly encourage is don't work yourselves to death. Don't take on so much that you can't possibly begin to get it done. So start selecting some of the high priority items that you want to include into your MTSS action plan. And then, how are we going to get there? The big step is starting that aligning your professional development needs with prioritized items. How are you going to make that happen? What kind of trainings does your school need? What kind of training does your team need? To make these things come into place so that you are moving through to absolute proficiency at your Tier 1 to begin with, and then moving into Tier 2 and 3. So the TFI has got an action plan that actually accompanies this to help you identify the needs. So in this, the big thing is pull up that action plan and just start recording. Which ones did I have a 0? Which ones did I have a 1? Start prioritizing these, because if you're a beginner into this process, you cannot do it all. Guaranteeing that. Cannot do it all. So start prioritizing what you can actually get done. What you have the resources for. What kind of administrative support do you currently have? Do you have the money? Do you have the time? And when you start taking a look at these supports and matching them to the needs, what kind of training and other resources are you going to need? So this would be taking a look at your actual TFI score piece. And that is, all you got to do is go through and put in there the places that you do have a 0 or you do have a 1. And, you know, then start taking a look at what actions we need to do, who's going to do it, and when are they going to do it. So this ends up being kind of a two-step process in the fact that by utilizing this kind of puts it all out on the table, because this becomes your absolute brainstorming document to start, for your different tiers. We just show an example of Tier 1 and then how we're taking a look at some of the Tier 2s. So this becomes your brainstorming. Now, when you start prioritizing some of these pieces, I really want you to remember that when you're a beginner with this whole process, you have to emphasize Tier 1, because what we know is if we don't have most of the items at Tier 1 at a highly proficient or 2 level, it makes it very difficult to impact Tier 2 and 3 with the amount of emphasis and fidelity that is needed. Now please know that this kind of just begins that conversation as to how to move into all of your tiers and a system-wide process. So please emphasize and begin prioritizing at Tier 1 and then move you into Tier 2. So if we were taking a look at kind of brainstorming some action plans, and please note this is just the brainstorming piece because we have not moved into the specificities in our brainstorming as to who's going to do it, exactly when we're going to do it, who's providing the service, and that. That will come in when you truly put it into your MTS action plan. But when we're kind of taking a look at prioritizing for our action plans, what's immediate? Okay, we have got to review and edit some of the school policies to reflect our positive, proactive supports, and on and on and on. So that's an immediate thing. What is something that we need to do next year? Oh, and immediately we need to be planning on going to MBI. We just heard from Susan and reminding us that we need to be taking a look at planfully what it is we need to attend and learn from as one of our staff development pieces at MBI. Those are kind of some of our immediate actions. And then we have next year. Okay, we're in the spring. We need to be looking at what we need to begin really working hard at next year. What do our summer planning pieces look like? Well, maybe we need to consider some Tier 3 Swiss information systems. What are some other pieces that we need to put into place for next year? So now we need to take a look at what our MTSS action plan could look like. This is where we're going to be writing these in as a SMART goal. What are we going to do? What is the action? What are our objectives? Who is going to do this? Have we identified the barriers for getting this done? You know, is the fact that we're going to be losing bunches of money from the state this year, is that going to significantly impact what we're going to do? Don't know. Did your mill levy go down? Don't know that either. But these are some pieces that you need to be taking a look at. What are some of our barriers and how will they impact some of our action steps? When are we going to get this done? Who's doing it? And what kind of resources do we have? So then we need to continue to take a look at, and I'm not going to go through all the steps of the MTSS action plan. You guys have access to that on the Moodle, and I'm just making the prediction that you guys are all, from the teams that I have the luxury of working with, have got this action planning down to a science. So, but remember, get it all out on the table. What do we need to do? What are some things we need to do immediately? What do we need to be looking at utilizing the data from the TFI that we can get done right away? What do we need to take a look at as more of a long-term planning session? How are we writing into that school plan and all those crazy other pieces that go into this long-term process? The other step is, how can your consultants help you? Now, this is where the consultants come into play, because it's very important that we communicate with you and that we are truly listening to what your specific needs are, so we can provide the support. Do we need to, like, get you information on something? Is this something that, yeah, we've heard about this training that we think by listening to you that might be something that um, your team could really benefit from? Is there something that we have seen at MBI that we know is coming back that would be a really good addition to what you already have in place? This is to help us coordinate the effort between your leadership and what the consultants can do for you. So we can assist you in identifying your strengths and how we can help you build onto any gaps that you have within your current system. Now, this is what the consultant plan looks like when we kind of send it back to you using all of the data that you have provided. Now, honestly, I feel like I have just flown through this, but please, please send me any questions that you have on implementing and utilizing a deep analysis of the TFI, because it's a pretty phenomenal document that can really guide teams into developing true strengths and proficiencies within all tiers. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Susan. This is Lori. I don't know if people can hear me. That was really helpful because I think people are not always sure how to use their TFI information, but like you're saying, there's just a wealth of information. It's just a foundation to build on to see what you can plan for. Did anybody have any questions or anything to go over?
Thank you, Lori.
I'm kind of scrolling through, seeing if there are any questions we missed here. What's really interesting, Susan, is I was just at APBS last week, and I went to a session that showed how they really use the TFI for action planning for their, their behavior implementation for their behavior side of MTSS. So, and everything you said aligns perfectly with what they were saying there. So it was really great.
Oh, nice to hear. We just had, Lori, and you certainly can assist me with this one. It's coming from Tim Shanks. As an MTSS replication school, do we concentrate more on the MTSS rubric or the TFI for action planning? Well, I kind of think both.
Yeah, that's a great question, Kim, and it's really interesting that you asked that, because right now I've got the rubric out in front of me on my desk, and I'm aligning the rubric with some coaching concepts to kind of help schools figure out where do they need to strengthen. And our view is both pieces of data are really helpful. The TFI really gives more information that's aligned with behavior, so looking at what you're doing with your school-wide behavior systems and your tiered behavior systems. And so that's real targeted to that. The rubric is designed to cover the full spectrum of MTSS, so we're looking at behavior and we're looking at academics. And so ultimately, when we're thinking about sustainability and what happens in the state beyond the grant, if schools continue to do PBIS surveys and using the TFI, I think that's a wealth of information. But one of the things we've looked at is we've really put a lot of work into the rubric, and the rubric really represents both sides of the systems. So I think you can use the rubric independently, but there's just a lot of validation behind the TFI and what it can bring. So it just depends on what you want to focus on. For now, I think if you're really focused on the behavior side of what you're doing, the TFI is great. Actually, there's one for reading as well if you're looking at reading, but we're not going into that. But sustainability-wise, ultimately, I think you want to think about where you're going to put your efforts as far as assessment pieces. I don't know. What would you add, Susan?
Well, I think one of the things that we do know is that we need both. There has to be a balance. Am I being noisy here? Sorry.
You're fine.
One of the things that I believe is that we need to have behavior pretty much in place, and that then dovetails completely with all of the academic pieces. So good instruction we need at reading, math, and behavior. Now, the TFI looks pretty much at just the behavior side of it, and the rubric should support you more into the math and reading. But I think you need to attend to both. The TFI gives you some really nice pictures, especially of your leadership teaming and some of your systems approaches. If you've got all your systems done according to the TFI, it makes most of the rubric fall into place pretty well, especially if you're utilizing good, strong academic universal screenings, progress monitoring, and all those pieces in place for your academics. And I mean, it's just going to dovetail. But I think they match up pretty well. You know, if you're starting to look at the pieces and start tearing it up. I mean, sometimes I just want to cut up that rubric and like paste it into what we're doing with the TFI, so we're not answering the same question 7 times. But that's just my opinion.
As a consultant, I think it's kind of interesting to look at both of them for my schools and just see how well they align. You know, does one validate what we're finding in the other? For example, the TFI, it can be taken internally, so that's a self-assessment on the part of many of our schools. And so then it's interesting to go back and look at the implementation rubric and see for those items that do align, you know, is the information validated from the self-perception and the self-assessment versus the outside external look into the systems that we do with the rubric. So I think the two together help to clarify the picture and the data picture for our schools.
Those are great points, Julie.
I think sometimes there is a mismatch when we go in and do an on-site visit as when we're truly looking at evidence. And you need evidence for the TFI too, I think. So, but the rubric forces us to be able to say, what do you got? Show me. And because sometimes, especially in buildings where so much of this has become part of the sustaining piece, and when it's become the culture and systematic way that school just does business, it's like, well, it's just what we do. And it's like 3 years ago we wrote that down, but we don't write that down anymore because it's the way we do business. And I think I would like to encourage people that says when you write it down, it truly does supplement and support your sustainability, so that evidence, either with the TFI or the rubric, by keeping that an ongoing piece and your school knows the data and it's written down, it is shared, that is going to truly move you into sustainability long term. So when the phenomenal team members retire, or they move to another position, or you have an administrator move buildings, that your system doesn't fall down. That sustainability, utilizing both the rubric and the TFI, where you're supporting all of that with data and with evidence, I think that's what's really going to assist schools in developing that sustainability over time.
I totally agree. Any other questions from anybody or clarifications anyone needs? Well done. I'm glad you did this for us, Susan, because with everything coming up, it's a great review and overview and good message for how to use everything.